All right, I appreciate you hanging in there. I know that it's a lot to get on, but it's an important day to get started. So this is part two. What you should have done in the first video is just sort of realize, hey, there's these resources, and we saw what a good design brief looks like. And again, there's a resource to see that on the My Project Lead the Way website, right? It looks like this, and it's in 7.6 design brief example, so you can refer to it. I'm going to show you or get you started on a template for the Automoblocks project. And I've actually gone through and filled in the problem statement and the design statement for you. You're going to use those slides to figure out what would be appropriate for criteria and some additional constraints. So if you go to our classroom, right, one of the documents that's posted for today is Automoblocks design brief template. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. And you're going to make a copy of this and you're going to fill in some of the blanks. The designer obviously is going to be you. But here's the problem I'm going to start us with. Upon taking an Automoblocks car home, most children quickly become bored with it and lose interest. This in turn lowers their motivation for buying more Automoblocks products. So it answers those questions that we saw in the problem statement: who, what, where, when, and how many. And that's important. It's very specific. Who is the children at home? They have a problem with losing interest. What's the problem? They're losing interest. Where does it happen at home? When does it happen? Pretty quickly. How many? Most children, you can imagine, are going to get bored with it. So the design statement is simple. Design modifications and or accessories for the Automoblocks car to make it more interesting for children. So that part's done for you. You're going to use those slides and figure out then what would be appropriate for developing a solution that's going to meet the problem that is good, would go under design criteria and design constraints. So again, you're going to use this slide, right? So we go back over here and we find that slide for criteria. Which one of these will be appropriate for enhancing or making an Automoblocks vehicle cooler? And we won't just list the word aesthetics or performance. We may need to say maintains the ability to be assembled and roll. Aesthetics, make it look cooler. Product size and shape should be maintained, all of those things. So the criteria, you'll pick out which ones of those are important and belong on the brief. The same thing is true of the constraints. So some of these constraints will apply, right? So if we look at the constraints that I've put in there as a class, here's a few that we may not think about. You must be able to model what your enhancement in Inventor. And you must be modeled in Inventor by a high school student with only a few months of experience. So don't go overboard on your idea, because there's also another constraint, which is must be done by late April and early May. All right, so that's our timeline for that. These are the time constraints, but there should be a few more constraints that you can identify that go in there. Why is this important? Bear with me for a few more minutes, because I'm going to show you how you're going to be evaluated and what you're going to do today. I'm going to go back to the intro. I'm going to pull in the part one of the problem rubric. So on this, the first part of what's going to be assessed is what you're working on, this design brief. I'm going to go backwards here. Design brief is present, and in addition to level 3, looks like a professional document that a designer would submit to executives for evaluation. If you're able to print out that template that I did, that's a big step towards level 4. Of course, there needs to be appropriate wording and appropriate words in that document, so use the slideshow to put things in there correctly. I'm going to let you read what would let you score on others, but please use the rubric. Don't just motor along thinking you're doing it right. It would be a shame for you to get a 1 when you've missed, just because you missed some important points. The second part, right? Once we've clearly defined the problem, we got to somehow make this Automoblocks thing cooler. We're going to enhance it some way. You're going to brainstorm and start with 3 ideas, at least 3 ideas on how to make this thing cooler. It's important that you have 3 now, and you might have 1 idea in your mind, but we're not going to settle on that 1 idea. You got to have at least 3. So what does level 4 look like? For this one, it says, in addition to level 3, a 1 or 2 point perspective or oblique or isometric drawing is present. So we're going back to sketching from the very beginning of the year. The drawing shows what you anticipate the enhanced Automobile Blocks card to look like when complete. The drawing appears to have been completed by someone with an understanding of sketching and shading techniques. Level 3 says this: in addition to Level 2, the 3 ideas have multi-view drawings and approximate dimensions. The parts are buildable based on the drawings, and an obvious standard form of dimensioning is used. So again, just to put the timeline and the scope and sequence of this, your first thing that you should do before you even think about what you're going to do to the Automobile Blocks car is very clearly define and have a design brief filled out. This should be filled out and ready to print very soon. So you're going to fill in the question marks, you're going to look at the slideshow and see what criteria is appropriate and what other constraints should be in here. This has nothing to do with what you're going to do on Inventor or your ideas. It's just saying, what does our solution need to have and what's limiting it? Okay. The second thing you're going to do then is then and only then will you begin sketching, begin brainstorming and making sketches for the enhancement ideas. And there's graph paper and isometric paper up at the front of the room for you to do in that case. The sketches will be part of your Part 1 evaluation. So again, look at this rubric. Please, please, please don't just do a sloppy sketch because you know you're not going to get much further than a 1. Look at it and discuss amongst each other what these things mean. The decision tree we'll get to probably on Monday. Decision implies that we have to make a decision. So we have 3 things that we're thinking about. How are we going to decide on which 3 to implement? That's what we'll do on Monday, but you got to have 3 there. All right, I appreciate your patience and your grittiness of watching these 2 videos. The rest of the period is for you to work on that. Design brief first, sketches second.